of this morning's session. So you'll just have to accept that recording. So we're recording the session because I will circulate this recording to you afterwards. So if there's anybody else in your teams that you want to share it with, or anyone else in your network that you think actually this could be useful, then you'll have the opportunity. Obviously, feel free to do that. It also means if you want to go back over it, you've got the option to do that for yourself as well. If there's anything in there that you just want to revisit, because sometimes these things that we discuss, they're good ideas in the moment, but you might find, you know, a week, 2 weeks down the line, you kind of forget what's going on. There's so much going on in our businesses and in our roles as leaders. So you've got that as an option. So the other thing I need to do is start sharing my screen. So let me just do that as well. Zoom I love Zoom, but it moves stuff all over the place while you're using it. There we go. Good. Okay, so you should now be able to see my screen. What we'll do this morning, I've got some slides I'd like to share with you, because today's about content and giving you some new ideas and really starting to think about resilience and effectiveness in the teams that we lead. And I often say this when we start these workshops that I run, that today is about, you know, this session, this next kind of 50 minutes or so, because I'll aim to finish at about 5 to the hour to give you a 5-minute window before your 10 o'clock. That's the idea. But these sessions are an opportunity just to kind of slow down and get off the treadmill, because we often feel like we're on a treadmill. It's almost like a race to the end of the week, isn't it, for most of us? Get off the treadmill and just get some clear thinking space. Because that clear thinking space is where you create the opportunity for change in your business. And that's really important, because if we don't create that space for change, we end up doing the same things over and over again without realizing. And there's some interesting evidence that shows, for most people, the way the mind works, it recycles the same or similar thoughts up to 90% of the time. And the reason that's important for us to recognize it, because when we're leading teams, and we're trying to inspire change in teams, we need to recognize that their default is to go back to what they were doing before. So as leaders, for us, it's important to manage that for ourselves, and then we can manage it for our teams. But recognizing that sometimes these things are they require quite a lot of intention to get us and our teams to change, in particular our teams to change. So what we're going to talk about this morning is building resilience, building effectiveness. We'll look at what creates resilience and why that's important. Then we'll look at some principles for how to build resilience through tough times. But we'll also look at effectiveness, because it's one thing to build resilience. It's quite another to have effective, focused, high-performing teams. So we're going to try and tie in those two themes this morning. And I'm also going to try not to state the obvious. So I've got some ideas this morning that hopefully just get you thinking a little bit more laterally than perhaps you would do normally. And those ideas, you know, that's where innovation happens, right? Innovation happens when we broaden our horizons, start to think completely differently. And I'm a big fan of coaching, and you'll see that through the presentation today. I'm a big fan of coaching, largely because of the impact it's had on me personally, being coached. And the impact that it's had when I've then been taught to coach and I've been able to coach other people. And then thirdly, when I've been able to train people to coach and see the impact they then have on their team. So kind of, I've had 3 really valuable kind of experiences of coaching throughout my career. And hopefully you'll be discovering the same, or have a chance to discover the same. So I just want to share some what I think are quite interesting statistics around resilience and productivity in particular. And so a couple of sources here. University of California says that this is really interesting. You know, we live in a world now with so many distractions that the average time it takes to get back on task immediately after you've been distracted from your work is around 23 minutes and 15 seconds. That sounds like a long time, doesn't it? But it's really interesting evidence that they've got here that shows it's about how long you're distracted for when you move from one task to another, whether that's you distracting yourself or somebody grabbing your attention. And there's 3 elements to it. There is what it takes for you to orientate yourself out of the task and into the new conversation or the new distraction, whatever it is that you've moved on to. And then there's the time it takes for your mind to reorientate out of that and then back into the previous task, and then find flow again. They say it's about 23 minutes, which sounds ridiculous, but having been in that situation myself, I can appreciate it. What the Workplace Research Foundation found was that when we think about productivity, for those employees who are highly engaged in their work versus those that are less engaged or disengaged, there's a 38% productivity benefit. So actually, as leaders, sometimes, if you see someone that's perhaps not as productive, sometimes it can be important to get back to how do we get this person re-engaged in their work? Because without that level of engagement, just pushing harder won't give them or you the results that you're looking for. And then when we think about the way that we work, there's a lot of evidence around. There's a principle called the ultradian rhythm that talks about the body's energy cycle, and what that shows, and is validated by the University of Florida, is that 90-minute intervals of work are when productivity and performance are at their peak. If you push through beyond 90 minutes solid, productivity declines really rapidly. So actually having a break every 90 minutes, forcing whether it's you, yourself, or your teams to kind of after 90 minutes, take a break, stretch your legs, get some kind of refreshment, give yourself the opportunity just to clear the mind and come back is really effective way to reintroduce productivity. So the days of just kind of sitting down and working at your desk all day long, they just don't give you the level of productivity that you really need. And of course, without that productivity level, you start to find people's performance deteriorates. And then finally, 15% productivity boost demonstrated by people who exercise in the morning before work. So higher productivity throughout the day by trying to get some kind of exercise in the morning as part of your routine, which of course improves resilience. So not just mindset, but physical resilience as well. And I won't go through all of these today, but if you look at what are the fundamentals of health and well-being when we think about resilience, getting the right amount of rest, sleep, and recharging your batteries is really important. Getting some form of movement and exercise is really important. Having a fairly healthy diet, the right nutrition is important. And so is looking after your mental health and well-being. So all of these things combine to give us, what is a recipe for better health. And of course, health helps us to improve and drive resilience. So perhaps not exactly what you were expecting this morning. And then we've got this thing about building resilience. And there's lots of ways to do this, but I like this chart. There's 8 kind of key things that we can do to help ourselves and our teams build resilience. The first is around, manage yourself first. We've all heard that the kind of the acronym for when you're on a plane and the oxygen mask come down, make sure that you put your mask on first. So your mask on before somebody else's, because if you don't look after yourself first, you're not in a position to help others, and that's particularly important for leaders. So we have to make sure that we prioritize our health, well-being, whether that's mental, physical, whatever you need to do for yourself. And I've had personal experience of this where I've not intentionally, actually completely unintentionally, started to drift from looking after myself first and putting other people first, or putting the business first, or putting myself under a level of pressure that in the moment you almost get drawn into without realizing. And then certain habits that you have start to slip away, and before you know it, you're 6 months in, you're not enjoying your work, things seem much less positive, and you start to notice that you are deteriorating. It's really important that we catch ourselves earlier than that, put in place the right foundations. And then the other thing that's important is purpose, understanding why we do what we do, really kind of trying to, for each person that's working for us as leaders, what are their core motivations? How do we help them to tap into those core motivations and do a bit more of the work that's more meaningful for them? Then looking at opportunities, because as we start to, if you've got people in your teams and perhaps resilience is not as strong in that person, you may find that they start to, again, inadvertently start to think negatively, and negative thought patterns, negative, almost creating barriers for themselves it starts to erode resilience. So actually we need to start to think about, okay, what's the opportunity here? How do we start to look at possibility? What could change? How could that change bring, new energy, new positivity for everybody? And as simple as that sounds, without intentionally focusing on it, it's really easy to kind of slip into this kind of negative slump without even understanding what's driving it. Goal setting is really important as well, establishing and pursuing goals that either are in the business or personal to that person within the business, but establishing goals and revisiting goals. We'll talk about this in the second half of our session today. Really important because goals give people a focus and a sense of progress towards moving in the right direction. Of course, embracing change, and that's sometimes easier said than done. But there's a lot of evidence to show that people who adapt and embrace change actually feel much more positive about their work, build higher levels of resilience, are much more capable of kind of pushing through difficult periods of time. And often change brings difficulties, but embracing it and recognizing that part of eroding resilience is resisting change. So we have to start to learn to embrace change. And of course, then maintaining, the right relationships at work, nurturing those relationships, making sure that we're supportive of each other, that as a leader, you're facilitating a team that support and nurture each other in terms of their performance and their relationships at work. And then kindness, right? So practicing compassion to yourself and to other people in the team. And as leaders, we have a disproportionate impact on our teams. So what we demonstrate tends to create the culture. So that compassion is really important. It doesn't mean we can't be direct, and it doesn't mean we can't hold people to high standards, but we should also practice some form of compassion and understanding for people, because that's what really helps them to build resilience in their roles. And then, of course, final piece, which is probably the underpins everything else, is lifelong learning, and really helping our teams to start to look at how they can grow and develop in their roles, because that growth helps them with resilience. And I love the quote on the left: for none of us life gets easier or more forgiving, we get stronger and more resilient. But we only do that if we have the right outlook and we put in place the foundations. So we have to get the foundations to be able to make that shift in focus and thinking around resilience. And then I like this, that you'll have all seen the Golden Circle, I'm sure, from Simon Sinek, where he talks about finding your why, and he puts it at the center of the circle, which is where it should be, in terms of motivation. But whenever I think about goal setting and I think about conversations with teams that I'm leading, I always think about the three questions in this order. So what do you want to achieve is question number one. What's important to you, what you're trying to achieve. And then most people will go from what are you trying to achieve to, okay, let's talk about the plan. How are we going to deliver that? And the step that gets missed out is the why, which is actually giving people a bit of space to figure out, why is this important to you? Because when you get that why question answered, and it's personal to one of your team members, that's the bit that gives the intrinsic motivation. That's the bit that really kind of stokes the fire and ignites some passion in them. And from there, you can then talk about, okay, how we're going to achieve this. But it's so often the missing link is, sitting down with each individual and having a conversation about why for them it's important that they're successful, or why for them it's important that they are able to do what they want to do in the business. And then a plan and the how becomes much easier. So reminding ourselves of that is really useful, because this all links to what drives resilience. Actually, very often it's about the individual, and what's going on for them is whether or not they can start to build and drive resilience for themselves. And I'm a big fan of routine. And if any of you have read any of the kind of different habit books, there's a great book called The One Thing by Jay Papasan and Gary Keller that talks about prioritization and building habits. There's also James Clear's Atomic Habits, really, really useful work. And both of those books talk about what it takes to build the right habits. But the interesting thing they talk about is that once you establish and build the right habits, it actually gets harder to stop than it does to continue. And one of the things that really underpins a lot of resilience is the morning routine. So what we do first thing every day will often determine how we feel about ourselves and what we're able to then accomplish in any given day. And of course, one day at a time, when we start to build change, one day at a time makes such a difference, especially when you start to map that out. Making a simple change every day, you map that out over, a month, a quarter, and a year, and all of a sudden transformation happens. And I'm a big fan of thinking about how you start every day. And this isn't my advice. This is stuff from Tony Robbins, who is a pretty successful coach in the US, and Robin Sharma's book, The 5 a.m. Club. And what they talk about are four things. So the first thing they talk about is having some kind of positive psychology that you go to every morning. The second is making sure that you move your body and you get some kind of physical health activity in place every morning. And then they talk about generating energy. And you can do that sometimes through the physical health. If you don't do the physical health, you can do it perhaps through, whether it's meditation or mindfulness or some kind of activity that you do that's intentional around your energy. And then the fourth is about creating some clarity, calm, and focus at the start of every day. And if you get a routine in place that meets 3 or 4 of these different areas, it really does help to change the way that you approach every single day. And of course, once you're doing this, it's much easier for you to then have that clarity and focus when you're managing and leading your teams. So I thought I'd share mine this morning. This is what I do every day. So every day I ask myself 3 questions. They're called again, I can't take credit for these. Tony Robbins taught me these years ago. There are 3 power questions that he teaches. So power question number 1, and I ask myself this every single morning as I get up. Power question number 1 is, what am I most grateful for in my life right now? So, and the whole idea is that nothing needs to happen for you to feel that sense of gratitude and appreciation. The second question I ask then is, what am I most excited about in my life right now? And you may be thinking about your day, you may be thinking about your life more broadly, entirely up to you. And then the third question is, how do I make sure today is a brilliant day? And those 3 questions asked every day just change the trajectory of your thinking. Really, really powerful. So 3 questions: gratitude, kind of excitement, and then how do I make sure today is a brilliant day? And that really do set you up, give you this frame of thinking for the rest of the day that follows. I then, with that final question around how do I make sure today is a brilliant day, mentally rehearse. So I've already thought about this session this morning. I've got 3 other kind of client sessions on today. So I've already started this morning. First thing I was thinking, right, how's that going to go? How's this one going to go? And envisioning, enjoying it, people engaging, and actually, everybody having great value from the session. So I've kind of already preempted this for this morning. So we're all going to have a great time anyway. But that mental rehearsal is really important because it makes you changes the energy that you take to every situation. And then this morning I went to the gym. So I get up, do that mental rehearsal. Then I go to the gym. I had an hour at the gym. I come back from the gym. I stretch. I do a quick. It's kind of a meditation, more of a mindfulness exercise. And then I'll shower and start my day. And that happens. So I do that, or a version of that, every single day. And I find that because I do it every day, it just changes the way I approach every single day when I'm working with clients, when I'm working in my business. I'm much more energized. I feel much more positive about things. But if I notice that if there are days in the past where I don't do it, it makes a real difference to my energy and how I show up. Okay, so then I want to also share this idea with you. I don't know if a show of hands, who's heard of Ikigai? Chris has got his hand up. Chris, yeah, Chris has heard of it. Anybody else heard of Ikigai? No, okay. Well, some of you may have done, but you're feeling shy this morning. So let's talk about, this is a really interesting philosophy. So what is it? Ikigai is a Japanese concept, and it refers to a passion or purpose that gives value and joy to life. Okay. And it originated in the Heian period of Japan, particularly in the Okinawan Islands. And it's similar to the French term raison d'etre, which means reason for being. And I don't know if anybody on the call has watched, there's a Netflix series called The Secrets of the Blue Zones. If you haven't watched it, I highly recommend it. I think it's about 6 episodes, about 45 minutes, but it's an American scientist who is basically has researched, there are certain parts of the world, they call them the blue zones. And what happens in those parts of the world is that they have a disproportionate amount of centenarians, people who live above 100. And they're not just living above 100, they're living really fulfilled, active, healthy, happy lives over 100. And one of those areas is Okinawa in Japan. It's one of the regions, it's a blue zone. And one of the reasons it's a blue zone is because they practice this principle called Ikigai. So what is Ikigai? What they talk about in this concept is finding the intersection of 4 things. Okay. So the first thing is what you love to do. So find something that you really love to do. And this can be work, this can be personal, hopefully it's a blend of both. Okay. What you love to do. And then secondly, find things that not only do you love to do, but you are also good at doing. So I love to do it and I'm good at doing it. And then third, they talk about, well, let's do third and fourth. Third, they talk about what the world needs or what is meaningful for you. So what helps you to feel like you're contributing? Because sometimes what the world needs can make people think, well, how do I bring that into my work? But actually, we can think about how it contributes to something bigger than yourself. Okay, so it may be that it's, it helps your business team. Maybe that it helps your customers to achieve something. It may be that it helps a local community that you're working with. Maybe that it helps an association you're involved in. But it's basically starting to transcend yourself. I'm doing something that has meaning beyond me. And then finally, the last thing is what you can be paid for, or what at least allows you to live a comfortable life. So we've got these 4 different elements of Ikigai, and what they try and encourage in Okinawa and that region in Japan is, how can you bring this into every element of your life? How can you bring it into your work? How can you bring it into your relationships? How can you bring it into your community, into your hobbies and your passions? And actually really starting to think that what they try and do, as you can see from the diagram, is really try and get these different elements to overlap. So it's not in isolation. We don't think, wow, I've got to go to work and that's really difficult and I don't like it. And then I can do something I enjoy in the evenings. Actually, it's really starting to find that blend. And, when I think about my former career in, corporate, and about 7 years ago, I decided I was going to make a change and start to work for myself. I look at this chart and I recognize why I had to leave, because I was doing something I was good at and I was being paid for it, but I didn't enjoy what I was doing. I drifted away from the things that I love doing, like coaching, like mentoring, like spending time with people, customers, team. I drifted away from that because I was doing a lot of reporting, a lot of corporate meetings, a lot of internal reviews that just started to kind of drain the life from me. And it didn't feel like I was making any kind of impact whatsoever. And so I was hitting 2 of the Ikigai segments, but missing 2. So I was like 50% fulfilled. And then as soon as I made that switch, started working for myself, started doing things I really love to do, started to help people outside of myself. So I was helping clients, helping people in my network, running sessions like this. All of a sudden, my energy returned and my resilience increased dramatically. But a lot of it is about finding for yourself, and it will be personal for each of you, but it will also be personal for your teams. Starting to have conversations about this really help you and them to start to think, actually, there's something more to this than just the day-to-day work. And how do I help to trigger that emotional connection to something bigger, deeper, and more meaningful? So really useful for all of us to think about that. And then I don't know if anybody, as I said at the start, sharing some ideas here. I just want to stimulate your thinking this morning. I read this book by a guy called Daniel Pink 12, 15 years ago, maybe even longer, when I was in leadership, in a leadership position, running a business team. And it was really interesting to me that the book is called Drive. So if you haven't read Drive by Dan Pink, it's a good book. It's definitely worth a read. And what Dan Pink unpacks in that book, through research and lots of work that he and his research team have done, is what is it that, when all things are equal, if someone's in a job and you're relatively well paid, or you're well paid enough to live on what you earn, you have security and stability in your life, you're kind of going through the motions, what is it that then really drives that next level of motivation? What do we need to do? How do we kind of unpack it? And he talks about 3 things, and it spells out the word MAP. So it's the map of intrinsic motivation. And so if you're managing teams, you may have been in the business for a while, there may be things that people are perhaps going off the boil. The 3 areas that we can focus on above reward and recognition, all that stuff that tends to happen anyway in a business. There are 3 things. The first is mastery. So what mastery means is growth, professional growth and personal growth, and helping people to recognize that there is still an opportunity for them to get better in their role. So how does mastery for each member of your team becomes something that's an area of focus. So they start to feel themselves growing in their role. Okay. And whenever anybody feels like they've hit a plateau or a ceiling, that's when they can start to lose resilience and lose focus and effectiveness. So mastery is the first point. The second point then is autonomy, feeling as if you have a sense of control over what you do in the role, feeling as if there's a level of trust in your abilities and trust in you to complete the work and get it done. And that's it's interesting because some people really thrive on that. Other people need a bit more direction. But once you give them the direction, then it's about figuring out how do I create autonomy for this person so they feel a sense of control over their results and performance. And that's you can ask people that question. It can be really useful to discover that. And I learned as I was applying this in different leadership roles I was in, I noticed that actually it did make a real difference. People who were disgruntled about certain areas, if I got them to focus on these 3 areas, they tended to be happier and healthier and more resilient at work. So it really does work, this stuff. And then the third area, of course, is purpose, which links us right back to Ikigai. So I used to manage lots of different business teams. And the thing that I found really useful for them was to get them to focus on the impact of their work for our customers, for other people in the teams, for if we were working with communities or associations, with the impact that we're making on those communities. And just even if it was like maybe they were a couple of steps removed from that, but actually bringing them back to recognizing how their work and the completion of that work contributed towards something bigger, i.e. the purpose of doing the work, could really help them to start to feel more valuable and more valuable in themselves. And so then we just continue this cycle, help people to continue to grow, have a sense of control, and feel as if they're contributing to something above themselves. And these aren't obvious things to go to. They're not like obvious, oh, well, make sure I bring that up in my next review to my team. So hopefully today it's starting to stimulate your thinking about, okay, what could you do with maybe yourself, but certainly with your teams to help them to start to get this change and switch in focus around their work. And the reason all this is important is because what we do, the way that the mind works, we have this kind of system in our brains called the reticular activating system. And what that system does is it's particularly important for goal setting. So once we decide we want to do something, or once our teams decide they want to achieve something, the mind tunes in. It's no longer vague and kind of just ambling through every day. It starts to look for opportunities to meet the goals that we set. So if we start to think about, okay, intentionally building resilience, intentionally becoming more purposeful about work, intentionally coaching our teams, you will find that you will look for more opportunities to do that, and you'll also start to hone your skills. The same is true for your teams. But if we never set that intention, then we don't have the opportunity to activate the system. So doing this for yourself and doing this for your teams is really important because it gives you that sense of purpose and momentum and movement towards something bigger and better. And I'm just going to share this leadership system with you because I use this with a lot of clients. It's really effective. We have this cycle when we think about making this transition from, if you're in your business and you maybe have found yourself kind of having to give too much direction to your teams, then thinking about how you start to coach them and thinking about a broader approach to coaching is really important. And here's the model that I use and that my clients use, and it works really well. So first of all, we think about, having the right relationships with people, building trust and establishing credibility. So that's important as a leader. So there are a few things you can do that make that intentional. Then we think about, having a plan that we are following and communicating so that people feel as if there's structure and that they're not just, rocking up and going through the motions every day. We're working towards something that's a bit bigger, a bit more kind of visionary. Once the plan is communicated, then it's about creating what we call a contract. So having an agreement with people about the standards that we'll reach and the levels of performance that we want to achieve. So contracting with people to get that agreement. Then we look at objectives and goals, and we're going to talk a little bit about objectives and goals next, and then we'll go to like an open discussion. So objectives and goals next. Then there's action and observation. So spending some time watching your team, what are they doing? How are they performing? Because when you spend some time observing them, then you're able to see opportunities to coach them. So you'll see things they can't see. And then the coaching is really effective. And you'll have heard a lot about coaching, but if we don't follow the 3 or 4 steps beforehand, coaching isn't as effective. It tends to be a bit vague and a bit woolly, because if you coach someone on just a generic topic, you're not really giving them that level of focus to get the professional growth they need. And then the final step is about development planning. We call it heroes in the making. And it's the impact that leaders have, the disproportionate effect, as I said earlier, that leaders have on teams, and helping them to start to see a bigger picture for themselves, start to see greater opportunities for their contribution in the business. And that becomes a cycle that we follow. But I want to talk about a bit about objectives and goals, and then we'll open it up. The reason objectives and goals are so important is because they give people clarity. And if you look at the research, Gallup, who are the poll company, the older members of the audience might remember the Gallup Top 40. They used to do the charts years ago. And now what they do is they do a lot of business intelligence and business research. And there are 12 questions around employee engagement called the Gallup 12. And what those 12 questions do is assess and measure engagement in organizations. And what they found is that the number one indicator of engagement is clarity of expectations. So the clearer someone feels about the role they're doing and what's expected of them, the higher engaged they'll be. Direct, straight line, number one cause of engagement is clarity of expectations. And then second kind of interesting statistic from Hay Research is a manager's ability to influence team engagement. So a manager's ability to make or inspire the team to be more engaged through creating clarity is as much as 70%. So huge opportunity for leaders to give people more clarity. And I like to think about the direct link between clarity, clear direction, and motivation, acceleration, innovation, and then being able to kind of celebrate success. So I use this principle around objectives and goals, where we think about setting overarching goals. So not, for each person in the business, normally people have job descriptions, but they don't necessarily have goals and expectations. And that tends to be a missing link. So first of all, for that person, what are the overarching goals for their role? Once you understand the overarching goals, we then start to think, what are the priority results that need to be delivered by that role? And what are the actions that will deliver those results? And really, it's the difference between leading metrics and lagging metrics. So the actions are leading metrics, the results are lagging metrics, and recognizing the difference between those two. What does it take in action to deliver the result? Okay, and that sometimes takes a little bit of fine-tuning with people. And the way I structure this and think about this is 1-3-3. So this, again, the principle for this came from the One Thing book with Jay Papasan and Gary Keller. They talk about the principle. They don't talk about it as clearly as this, but they talk about one thing and then linking to priority streams and then priority activities that link to those streams. And I'll show you what that looks like in a moment. But we think one goal, 3 streams of activities or 3 areas that are priorities, and then 3 activities in each of those priorities. We want to be able to discuss that with each team member, get agreement and their commitment to work on those numbers. And then once it's in place, find a way to review it in a rhythm, right? And I think monthly is a really good rhythm. Any less than that, and you'll find people drift. So what it looks like in practice is a really simple tool. So I call this the 1-3-3 planning tool. And what it shows is that you start with, a goal that you want to achieve. And this is like a commercial kind of sales type goal. So it would be generate this amount of revenue, margin, growth, and clients. And so you'd say, right, there are the numbers that we're tracking. So that becomes your overarching goal, and setting those as standards. And then within that goal, in order to deliver that goal, we want to look at 3 key areas, so 3 priorities. So one might be managing the sales and the growth. 2 might be managing a pipeline and making sure that you've got an eye on the future. And 3 is around managing clients day to day to make sure that they get what they need in order to remain committed and follow through. And so then you have 3 activities per priority. And then what you see is you get a really simple tracking tool that enables you and your team to sit down on a regular basis and say, how are you getting on against, the goals and expectations that we agreed at the start of the year? And when you get that in place, and the responsibility for having this clarity and managing it is clearly with your team member, and they have a really clear way of documenting it, updating it, monitoring it, and tracking it, you get like a laser focus on clarity. And when you get I guess a process and a system like this in place, the difference it makes to people is like night and day. But it also links, so this is really good because it links to resilience, but we have to do the other things around resilience. So this is like practical, tactical. How do you get people day to day to be clear and focused? But then we also need the less tactical ideas, like, are they looking after themselves? Are they purposeful? Are they doing work that they find meaningful, they're good at, they're enjoying? And all of those other conversations that are perhaps a little more ethereal, when we link them with something that's really clear and specific like this, it's like we get people firing on all cylinders. We get people really tuned in to high performance. So I wanted to share kind of 2 elements to today's session. Perhaps the more habitual based kind of content, where we look at what is it that people need to do for themselves, and then starting to think, what can we do that gives people clarity, because that builds resilience as well and makes people enjoy their work much more. And I have this as a template. If anybody wants a copy of the template, please let me know. I'll happily share with you that 133 planning tool. And there's a blank. You can see there's a blank copy there. I've got an example copy and a blank copy. Happy to share that if that's useful. And then final thing is about feedback. So making sure that we encourage feedback and we make it part of the leadership and business process, because as people develop their skills, develop their performance, we need to encourage them to feedback, so that gives us the opportunity as leaders to grow and develop ourselves. And if it's good enough for Bill Gates, it's definitely good enough for me. We all need people who will give us feedback. That's how we improve, whether that's through your teams, through mentors that you work with, through coaches that you work with. That feedback really helps us all to improve and develop. Okay, I've been talking for about just over half an hour now, so I'm just going to stop sharing and just give you an opportunity just to start to think about. We've gone through a lot of content there, and I purposely wanted to just sow a lot of seeds this morning. I'd love it if you would share some feedback. What are you thinking in terms of your business or yourself or your teams? What are you thinking in terms of how this helps and what you might need to focus on from this workshop? Who wants to kick us off with some feedback?
Can I start?
Yes, please do, Abir. Yes, thank you.
Hi. First of all, thank you very much for these interesting presentations. There is a lot of take-home message from this presentation.
Yeah.
I like the way how you present. I like the first circle, that how we can improve resilience. The 133, it's a new, this for me, it's for my first time heard about it. Also the EKG. I don't know how you spell it.
Ikigai.
Ikigai, yeah.
It's not easy to say, Abir. Thank you.
Yeah. And but because I'm leading now, I'm in a leadership position, and I'm leading a team under me, and I'm working in the healthcare. I am a dentist by practice, and I'm now leading the patient experience in my organization.
Oh wow.
But I found some resistance for changing,
Yes.
for my staff, because once we built my department, actually we didn't hire new people. We bring people from patient relation to be a patient experience, and we are in a stage where we have to change their mindset from patient relation to patient experience. And we did a lot of workshops, master classes, but again, we find some people, there's some resistance for change. So what's your advice, just to bring these people from the resistance to acceptance and growth, building career, whatever you can say it.
Yeah. Yeah, great question, Abir. Thank you, and thanks for the feedback on the session. I'm glad you enjoyed it and found those elements valuable. Resistance to change is actually more natural than people accepting change. Okay, so
Yes.
resistance to change is more natural than people accepting change. One of the things that happens, one of the things I've noticed in businesses that I've led, is that the people that resist change genuinely think that by resisting it, they won't have to comply. Right. So they're resisting it because they think if I resist this long enough, they'll give up on me and I can carry on doing what I'm doing. And sometimes you can do, you do all the things that you need to do. You put in place change initiatives, you run workshops, you get people on board, and then there'll be a few outliers that just like resist. And what I've found is the moment those people who are resisting realize that even though they're resisting, this change is happening around them, and if they don't get on the bus, then they are potentially isolated. Yes. They're the ones that are not changing, and everyone else is embracing change. Once they recognize there's that pressure and it's not going away, and the will of the leader to make this change stick is stronger than their will to resist, they change. Okay.
Yes.
And it doesn't happen like in one conversation. Very often it doesn't happen in two conversations, perhaps not three conversations, maybe not even four conversations. Yes. But at some point, when they recognize, okay, this is not going to go away, I need to get on the bus. And sometimes I have noticed a bit, sometimes I've been able to fast track that, getting them on the bus by having a very direct one-to-one conversation with them. And almost, sometimes people think when they're resisting, nobody knows I'm resisting. They're like, oh, they don't really know, or they don't mind my resistance. As soon as people recognize, actually, your resistance is causing us a problem now. Okay. And if you aren't able to change, it potentially creates a risk for you in the organization. When they hear those words directly, they're like, oh, okay, so I'm not getting away with this. And that's when they start to change. So there's a few things that you can do.
Yeah.
But it takes some courage. As a leader, it takes some courage to have some of those more difficult conversations. And we want to always combine those conversations with, and when you do change, when you do embrace the change, here's the benefits for you. It's going to really help your career. It's going to help you be, to build your credibility. It's going to be really positive for you. But if you don't do it, here are the risks. Right? You are literally risking your position. And that leverage is what helps people to make that final change. Is that helpful?
Yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thanks for the question, Abir. It's difficult. Leadership roles are the most difficult roles in any business because you have to manage yourself and drive your own results, and you're responsible and accountable for the results of your team. And that's why it's that, as obvious as that sounds, sometimes it's not until we're in those leadership positions we realize, damn, this is hard. Damn, this is harder. Why didn't anyone tell me it was this hard? I might not have done it. Thanks, Abir. That's great. I'd love to hear from other people on the call.
Hello.
Hello.
Can I add one more question?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
For the people that you feel that they have the fixed mindset.
Yeah.
And they are adopting this mindset. And you keep on trying. Every time you repeat the same goal, the same objective, you show them the benefits out of doing or taking a certain step.
Yeah.
In this case, what are the options available to try to change? They are adopting this mindset. They do feel that we are right and others are wrong.
Yeah. So how to help? Is it, Ola, is your question how to help them change their mindset?
Yes. Yeah. I tried more than one strategy. I tried the one-to-one conversation.
Yeah.
I tried to show the benefits many times. I tried to show 2 scenarios before and after. Okay, what will happen if we skip this step? Yeah. What will happen if we adopted this step? I showed both results.
Yeah.
But finally, they showed me on, okay, they got convinced. But later on, I found that they are still adopting this mindset. They don't want to take any step to change.
Okay.
So, and then they are affecting the environment.
Yeah. Yeah. It's that's difficult, Ola.
Yes.
So
Yes.
here's an observation.
Mm.
There's a couple of observations, right? So one is that sometimes when you're leading and driving a change, it's really tempting to continually lay it out to people. Here's the here's the change we're trying to make. Here's the outcome we're trying to get to. Here's what's in it for you. Okay, and people have this ability to deflect these things that are told to them, right? They've got this like almost like external invisible shield. So as you're telling them things, they might be going, yeah, I get it. And then it deflects off. They're kind of inside, they're saying, I'm still not sure. I'm still not convinced. It's hard work. It's still more commitment from me. It means me having to do something different. Remember I said right at the start, I don't know if you hear right at the start, Ola, I said, the way the mind works, people will repeat and recycle the same thinking 90% of the time. That's why change is so hard, because the mind is kind of almost habitual, right? So we're fighting against someone's own self-talk and self-beliefs. The thing that starts to shift it is when, instead of the change coming from the outside in, someone is coached and the change starts to come from the inside out. Okay, so that's the distinction. In those conversations with your teams, when you're laying out these are the changes, instead of saying, here are the benefits, this is what I need you to do, the switch that can be useful is to say, you guys now know what needs to be done. What is it you need to do to convince yourselves you're going to do it? And wait, and let them tell you. Because without that intrinsic processing, that internal processing, them thinking to themselves, right, actually, what is it, answering the question, what is it I need to do to get myself on board with this change? And getting genuine commitment from them so that it comes from them. I think that may be the kind of key transition that you need to try and make. All right. Does that help?
Yeah. Useful. Thank you.
No, pleasure. And these things aren't, I know exactly what you're going through. It's not easy. So also remembering, the same conversation that I think we had a minute ago, where we recognize that often these changes, you have to revisit the change, really, somewhat becomes like a drumbeat, so that people recognize, right, this isn't going away. The combination of them having to explain what it is they're going to do to change, and how they get themselves motivated to change, and what specific actions they'll take, and this recognition, actually, this isn't going away. That's really important. Brilliant. Thank you for the questions this morning. Can I, before I'm just going to, because of timing, I do want us to finish by 5:02. Because of timing, there's a couple of things I want to share. Before I do that, I'd love to take a quick selfie of everybody on this morning's call. Is everyone all right to come on camera so that I can take a quick screenshot, and then I'll share this on social media, and I'll tag you in. I'll do a LinkedIn post today if everyone's up for that. Is everyone? Oh, thank you. Oh, look at that. Brilliant. Thank you very much. Let me just, is everybody that can come on camera? Yeah. Is everyone all right? I'm going to give you a countdown, 3, 2, 1, so that I don't get any surprised faces. So here we go. Ready? 3, 2, 1. Brilliant. You all look amazing. Fabulous. Thank you so much. That's great. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate you all being here this morning. Thank you for coming on camera for that as well. Let me just, if you're okay, for 2 minutes, I've got a couple of things I'd like to share with you before we wrap up that hopefully are useful. So let me do that. So we did key actions. So I want to share with you that I run an annual program around helping leaders to become better coaches. We call it the Coaching Leaders Academy. We are registering people for our 2025 program. It starts at the end of January. If you would like to join us or be considered for joining us, then feel free to contact me. But it's basically a 12-month development program. So I share this with you because it's been really useful for the leaders that we work with on it. And we every year we kind of bring a new cohort together. Lots of stuff in here. So there's lots of e-learning. We get once a quarter, we get together for a full day of training, mentoring and coaching. And then every month there is a monthly live Zoom workshop where we bring people together, just give you an opportunity to share a bit like today, you know, some of those challenges, what are things that you might need a bit of coaching on, a bit of direction on, and give you the framework and the support and the community to start to make the changes that you need to in your role. So I wanted to share that with you in case anybody thinks that would be useful for them or leaders in their business. We also use this tool called the Coaching Leaders Scorecard, and it's really useful. It is actually a free tool. Let me just, I'm just going to share that link in case anybody wants to take this. It's like a diagnostic test. So let me just put that in the chat so that if you want to take that, you've got the opportunity to do that. There we go. Thank you. And I see there's a couple of, there's a message in the chat, just in case anyone, so Chris has said a blog about forecasting. Anybody in sales roles who's looking for a better way to forecast? Thanks for sharing that, Chris. That's good. And then as part of our workshops, we have this Coaching Leaders Toolkit. So it's like a toolkit that helps you to implement the ideas from the work that you're doing as we go through the program. And then we think about, 5 elements of success. So how do we get leadership success? We want places where we can have confidential conversations. We want a community of leaders that will support our actions and hold us accountable. We want people to collaborate with us and share ideas. We want our ideas and thinking challenged, so we disrupt that 90% of repetition and recycling thought. And we want someone to help us be committed to make the changes that we want to make. And without all of that in place, what I've learned over the years, it's really difficult to succeed as a leader without having those 5 elements in place. So we try and build those in to our programs. If anybody is interested, if you'd like to explore a bit more, or if you'd like to have a discovery session with me one-to-one, here's another link for you. This gets you into my calendar. So you have a 45-minute discovery session. If there's some things you're working on that you'd like a bit more support with, or something a bit more bespoke to you, then feel free to book a 45-minute session, and you can talk about any programs that we run as well. Okay, I'm conscious we've just gone past the 5:02 mark, so I'm going to pause there. For those of you who have 10 o'clocks, feel free to jump and run. Thank you. Lovely to see you all. For those of you, if anybody has got a question, they want to hang around for a couple of minutes, I'll happily stay on. But if you have got 10 o'clocks, feel free to run, and I'll look forward to seeing you at a future session. Thank you for joining, everybody. Have a great weekend if I don't see you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Bye.
Thanks. See you. Bye. Thanks, Chris. Thanks for the note. Ola, thank you. That's great. Have a great weekend, everybody. Anybody got any questions? As I say, I'll stop.